would not be surprised to find out in some years down the line that it was true. The reason that we found out a lot of Microsoft's tricks that they've done in the past, in the Windows 95, 98, 2000 era, is because of lawsuits and documentations they had to provide to lawyers in different lawsuits, and they've been put into the public domain system so that they can be accessed. That we wouldn't have known about them otherwise. So I would not be surprised in years to come if we found out that the reason why Microsoft seemed to get away with an awful lot of crime, I mean, let's face it, crime definitely does pay when it comes from Microsoft. They've proved that over the years, it definitely does pay for them. So the amount of different things that they've done and how little they've been punished or prevented from doing them, and various anti-competitive investigations and antitrust investigations that just get dismissed and get shunted out, it does make me wonder if there's something else possibly behind that we'll find out later on down the line. And I thought, well, what if it's in the government's interests? If Microsoft go to the various governments, like the US government, they have a little behind the doors meeting in Washington and say, right, if you want to instruct your system to drop the charges, drop the investigation into practice of whatever that Microsoft have been accused of, what we can then do is turn a blind eye to any keyloggers that your Secret Service are trying to put on Windows computers. Because what they want would then be every user in, for example, the Iranian government, every computer in the Iranian embassy, the Iranian government, the Chinese embassy, that type of thing, to be on Windows. That way the CIA could then work on some keylogger and make sure they could get it installed on the computer.
I just want to say, it's not much of a theory. I'll explain this later. We actually have some evidence on that. So.
Yeah, well, yeah. Sorry, it was just the idea that they could be turning a blind eye to that. They could say, we can give you a big national spy network by just turning a blind eye when we see that going through with a certain file name or something. We can turn a blind eye and just don't trigger it as something suspicious. And if any of our partners like Norton or McAfee or whatever pick it up, then we'll just say, well, that went through with the Windows update. Just ignore that. We know what that is, you know. And that way, they've got an instant spying network of as many computers that are on Windows, whether that's its own users and its own citizens in America or citizens in Britain and France. And wherever, you know, as well as governments. So they've got a sort of vested interest in making sure that Windows is the only thing that people can buy. So, yeah.
I mean, my take on this from a UK side, I think, yes, the government does have a vested interest in most people being Windows users. The reason being I would cite would be because of the pool of expertise that they have, which is rather limited in most government agencies. I think when you consider the amount of users on the net, if there are going to be agencies interested in what people are up to, then it makes sense that the most common package is the one that obviously that everybody's using, that their specialists are trained in. I remember Coffee. It was a forensic tool which was made by Microsoft, which scanned and copied duplicated hard drives and any removable disk drives that were on a PC. It was sort of like a USB stick type device. That only worked with Windows systems. So I think in that respect, yes, definitely that we have vested interest in everybody using the same thing. It might not necessarily be Windows, it could be anything. But for the resources that they have, I think, yes, it is better that everybody's using Windows in their point of view. In regards to whether they actually do it, I've got mixed views. There's very strict legislation on covert observation and overt observation under the RIPA, what's called the RIPA policy. And I don't believe that we would ever be in a state where we'd have enough resources to monitor effectively enough people on the internet or enough Windows users, because the experience isn't there, the resources aren't there within the government. So I don't know whether it's all part of a bigger plan, but my gut feeling is no, I don't. I don't think there's any more vested interest other than it makes it easier for the government to monitor.
I have stories to share here. I'm trying to do a UK perspective on that, since we're all in the UK. But the first one has to do with a friend of mine who lives in London, and he's a very curious person, and he knows from his work, he knows how to use Windows and and how to check secret processes or things that run under the radar. And when he goes to an internet cafe, and occasionally he does because he wants to access the internet while on the go somewhere, he does certain things he isn't exactly supposed to do. He goes and he checks the processes running, and every time he does that, he finds some spying process basically running and scanning what he's accessing. Now, we probably know about this from places like India, and I think they do it in China to an extent. I think it's becoming mandatory now that all coffee shops that provide internet access have to install something with the spyware baked in. But to find this type of thing in the UK is also quite interesting. So he sent me evidence and he sent me copies, and I actually published this in my personal blog before, and that was years ago. And it carries on doing that. And every time he finds that the internet cafes in a place like London are basically definitely doing that, and that depends on them using, of course, Windows. Even though in a public cluster it makes more sense and it's more secure to use GNU plus Linux. Now, another story that relates to a point brought up by Gordon a moment ago is Manchester does make money from very big outbreaks of malware. So a year and a half ago, there was a bit of a public outcry, at least for certain circles, because the administration in Manchester was paying Microsoft like 1.5 million pounds, I think, to try and correct an outbreak that basically spread around the city, only affecting Windows. The third thing that relates to the last point you made about coffee, about basically the back door for forensic purposes that's supposedly supposed to protect you from your data loss, but it's actually more of a back door to anybody to access your deleted files. Now the CIA, the FBI actually has this thing called CIPAV or CPAV. It's spelled CIPAV, and you can actually search it on Google and find lots of results on that. And that's a type of, I'm not sure if you would classify this as spyware or malware or something, but they actively do plant it on people's PC when they want to try and, when I say PC, I mean, Windows in their words, but they plant it on people's PCs in all sorts of ways, and then they take complete control of the person's computer. And that's an example, I think, of something which Microsoft and maybe the other so-called security vendors are in cahoots, basically not to identify or not to delete. So I think there was quite a bit of a storm on the internet when it was discovered that certain things, these things will not want to identify when found, because they're supposedly against terrorism, and these companies have to comply or to play nice with certain regulations and rules. So,
well,
I think it. Sorry, Gordon.
No, I was just going to say, I mean, as far as not sort of turning a blind eye, kind of letting it go, or colluding in it, whatever kind of level you want to think about it at, that can really only happen in a binary and a proprietary top-down system. I mean, you could imagine it happening with Apple because they know their system. They have very tight controls over who can modify and who can add to that. And again, Windows the same. Any proprietary company, you could not do that in open source. You just could not do that. I mean, imagine what would happen if they tried to say, well, we'll set Ubuntu as the standard, or Fedora, or whatever, Debian. It just wouldn't happen because of the peer review of people looking at that and going, hey, wait a minute, what's this code? what's that? This code we don't want this, and we'll compile it out, and attention will be drawn to it, even if the people at the top are trying to put it in.
You have to remember, you have certain distributions that are being used a